Anyway,
Hello, this is the Surviving Healthcare Podcast, and I'm very pleased to have Bill Supple here for the Ben Finn podcast. And he just put out a book called Cancer is a Parasite, and he's got a lot of breaking news for us. And I've followed him for over a year, and I think he's doing fantastic work, and I'm just very pleased. And we're his second interview for his book, so um, so that's an honor. Thanks and welcome to the show, Bill.
thanks. Should I call you Bob?
Yeah.
Thanks, Bob. The honor is mine. I've been following your stuff as well on Substack for quite a while. Not to be the Mutual Admiration Society,
Why
but
not?
it's it's pretty impressive. Between the dentistry stuff and some of the other things, it's pretty eye-opening. So I think we're kind of on the same page in a lot of topics.
So where are you, Bill?
I'm in a secret undisclosed location.
Until until just a little bit, he was entirely anonymous, but his publisher made him come out of the closet for the book. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, so I'm in southern Florida, and we are snowbirds. I'm retired. We live in Vermont during the warm part of the year, and we fly to southern Florida. Uh, so we're called snowbirds.
You
During the
hardly have any gray hair, dude. How old are you?
67.
Yeah, well, I'm 72 and I'm almost entirely white. Anyway,
Yeah. Well, I think my dad didn't go gray until he was 80, so I think it's an Irish trait. So
it's
somehow
it's
drinking
a
beer
it's a
must.
it's a robust sign of health.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm wholly into high dose vitamin D, so I think that's actually my next book coming
What are
out
your
from
levels? What
backwards.
are your levels?
Well, I'm around 110.
Yeah, I'm around 130.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I think that's going to be proven low in the future.
Yeah. I mean, I
So,
you can take anyway, we don't have to get into that. Let's talk about benzol.
yeah.
So
Well,
there's breaking news from Europe.
yeah. So, as a result of the book, um, there's been some rekindled information that has come out. You know how the CIA will dump documents that really have no meaning. They're just kind of like part of a FOIA request. And a someone who had been exposed to the documents 10 years ago. This was released in 2016. After they read the book, it had new meaning. The whole idea that anti-parasitics can cure cancer. So they um, went back and looked at the document from the CIA, and basically it was from 1951, a report that the CIA knew that the Russians had figured out that anti-parasitics cure cancer in the 1930s. So I haven't had a chance to go through those uh, original Russian papers, but that'll be interesting. So obviously fenbendazole wasn't around back then, but there were certainly experimental antiparasitics, and they found that, just like with what we found with fenbendazole and a bunch of different solid tumor cancers, that it's a true viable side effect free cure for cancer. So, the kind of the good news that I have today is that there's a real cure for cancer. And it's not overstating the fact that something like cancer can be cured. And, I would not have believed it myself if I wasn't directly involved in my mother-in-law's case. So just to kind of go back to how I started, who I am and how I got involved in cancer, it was kind of like a necessity as the mother of invention. So my mother-in-law in 2021 went in for what we thought was a bowel obstruction, which she did have. But in the process of doing that, doing the scanning, they said, whoa, you've got metastatic cancer everywhere. Her bones, lungs, liver, uh, basically everywhere. And it turned out to be metastatic breast cancer. And she was 83 at the time and said, I've lived a good life. I don't want to go through the torture of chemotherapy and radiation. I just want to go home and die. So she was so bad that in the hospital, being a Catholic, they gave her last rites because they weren't sure that she would make it home, which was a 2 mile drive. So, as luck would have it, I happened to be reading, I think it was a Mercola or Substack or publication, and it was the topic was not related to cancer at all, but in the comments, I think it had to do with bacteria, H. pylori, and stomach cancer. In the comments, someone said, just made a comment, try fenbendazole, it cured my prostate cancer. And that's really all it took to get me down to where I am here. So that word fenbendazole seems like a scary word. It sounds like it's toxic and dangerous and, certainly pharmaceutical in nature. But the more I looked into it, there was a lot of basic science, preclinical science, that described the mechanism and the likelihood that it actually did kill cancer. Because, and it happened, the flag, the reason why it was kind of questionable is it was fenbendazole is used to deworm animals, mostly dogs. So it's an animal anti-parasitic that has these amazing anti-cancer qualities. So I went down to Tractor Supply, which is an animal feed store, and got a packet of 3 of them and took it for myself. I figured if I'm healthy, I'll take it, see if there's any side effects. No side effects. My my wife was down with her mother in Florida, so I mailed her down a bunch of packets. My wife took it. We were thinking a 50% genetic match to her mother. If she took it and had no reaction, it should be fine because we didn't want to make a sick woman sicker. So anyway, the family, my in-laws, I sent them a letter about the email about the logic of trying this. And because my mother-in-law was not going to do anything else, she was, she said, actually, she didn't say anything. Her husband decided to mix it in her yogurt. So after, so
a blinded experiment.
yeah, right. Yeah. So there's no placebo effect. So after, he did that every day, the 222 milligrams, and he used, this particular
Yep.
brand, but they're all the same.
What's the website for that? It's
fenbenlabs.com.
finbinlabs.com, and that's where I get
Right.
mine.
Yeah. And a lot of people ask me which brand, I think they're all the same.
It's not approved for human use. However, that stuff is available, and they don't seem to regulate it.
Right. And you can get the human version, mebendazole, which costs about, 600 times more expensive.
And
So,
that's a molecule different.
yeah, but
Same thing.
yeah, fenbendazole actually works better for different types of cancers because it's a little bit more bioavailable systemically. Mebendazole was designed to stay in the gut. So while it can enter systemic circulation based on animal data, it's not idealized. So
And that's Povan, right? That's a pinworm medicine that is widely used, mebendazole.
yeah, or Vermox,
Vermox or Povan.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm a
My
PhD, not,
mother, my
yeah, I'm a
mother,
PhD, not an MD. Don't drop all those things on me.
my mother diagnosed pinworms in myself and my brother when we were little kids by taping a piece of tape to our backsides and identifying the damn pinworms. And I
Yeah,
remember very vividly seeing those things when she pulled the
yeah.
tape off in the morning.
Right. If only modern medicine had such sophisticated technology today to identify parasites. We don't even bother anymore. It's
Yeah.
assumed that we don't have them, so we don't look, uh, suspect, or treat them. I'll talk about that later. So anyway, back to how I got involved in this. So after about a couple of weeks, my mother-in-law was rallying. So she started to eat. Her activity, appearance, and attitude had completely changed. So by 4 weeks, She got rid of hospice. By 8 weeks, she was well enough to go back to the doctor, to her oncologist. So she had, a premortal uh, blood tumor marker, the CA2729, which is for metastatic breast cancer. That was at 316 when she left the hospital. When she went back 2 months later, it had halved to like 131, something like that. Under 100 is metastatic, under 38 is normal. So she continued, the oncologist said, you know, obviously there's nothing I've done to help you. Keep doing what you're doing. He expected her to never show up again.
An honest man,
An
an
honest man.
unusual honest man in a sea of fools.
And he was young, so he may have been somewhat naive. But anyway, he's, rightfully so. He told her, keep doing whatever you're doing. So then she had, now that she's motivated to live, she had some recalcitrant pain in her spinal cord. So they did some targeted radiation. And the oncologist or the radiologist noted that, boy, that the usual recipe that I have for you for this type of um, lesion, it resolved very quickly. So there's a lot of data showing that fenbendazole potentiates the effects of radiation and chemotherapy. So anyway, after about 3 months, her blood tumor markers were normal and she's been cancer free ever since. So she's getting ready to celebrate her 88th birthday. And she takes Fenben every day because why not? There's no side effects. I mean, that's the amazing thing with Fenben. It's the perfect cure for cancer because it's specific. It only kills the cancer cells, doesn't harm healthy cells. It's lethal. It doesn't fool around and leave anything left to become drug resistant. It kills them all at once. And there's no side effects. So it's kind of like the perfect cancer cure treatment. The reason why it's specific is parasites and cancer cells, most cancer cells, share a common structural defect in their microtubule biology, their makeup, so that the anti-parasitic, most notably fenbendazole and mebendazole, selectively target the parasites cells and not the healthy cells. So it picks them out of a crowd and kills them. And the way it kills them is there's 11 different ways it kills them, but the primary way that most people understand is that it depolymerizes or busts up the microtubule system in the cell, causing catastrophic failure in it, and it kills itself or it just dies because it can't get nutrients or expel um, waste products. It also can't divide because it uses the microtubule system in mitotic division. So that's the primary mechanism that it kills these cells. So as news of my mother-in-law's success, it's an urban legend now, right? So
Sure.
people want to know how she did it. So she says, call Bill. He knows. So my wife and I are like, this is getting out of control. Because first it was family, then it was friends of family, and then it was friends of friends. So we're saying the same thing over and over and over again. So I decided to do a Substack. So I figured out what that was all about. Again, remember, I'm retired. We had just retired. And it's like, this is the last thing I want to do. I don't want to get involved in this. I'm done. I mean, I'm retired.
You're not done.
Right. So anyway, so the one thing leads to another. So I figure out how to do the Substack and I do it anonymously because I figure I'm not an oncologist. I'm not even a cancer researcher. I'm a neuroscientist. And the message is what matters, not who the messenger is. And so, I didn't want to be, assassinated either because things happen.
Yeah, yeah.
So I published it under the pseudonym Ben Fen, and I became known as Ben Fen, and I was happy with that. And then about this time last year, my wife and I were walking on the beach, and I kind of said, it's hard to see what's not there. Like, where is the definitive book on fenbendazole and cancer? And, we were discussing it, and it was kind of like, well, the people who should write it probably can't because of career suicide, institutional capture, or a lot of different reasons as to why such an obvious book hasn't been written yet. So she said, well, you're the expert, you should do it. So here we are. So, I sent a proposal to Skyhorse, which most publishers would never touch this topic because they're, you know, afraid of big pharma or in bed with them, or somehow they're beholden to big pharma. But, I figured Skyhorse, because they publish RFK Jr. stuff, that they would be,
Tony is the hot ticket.
yeah, yeah. So they were all over it. And, they actually had me write a vitamin D book as well, which comes out in June. So that'll be interesting as well.
So you know Henry Lahore.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
I know of him. I don't know, you know, we're not buddies or anything, but
yeah,
I know his work from the vitamin D
yeah,
wiki.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So, back to my mother-in-law. So I published her case report on the Substack and then invited other people to who, nothing occurs in a vacuum. Fenben is well known from Joe Tippins, who was the original case report of Fenben. So Joe Tippins is someone who was given up for dead. He was in they think it was a early immunotherapy trial, perhaps Keytruda, where he was only one of 1,100 patients to have survived, and he took fenbendazole on the advice of a veterinarian friend of his who had cured her brain cancer using it, unbeknownst to the researchers. So when when Joe Pippins was in the exit interview, he asked the researchers how many other people had the same response that I did. The answer was none. And then he came clean and said, "Well, I'm taking this animal dewormer that had to be the difference." And basically they said, well, we've known for quite a while that, anti-parasitics have a role in cancer, but because there's no money in it, nobody's going to study it. And basically that was the beginning and end of it. So with the Substack, what I was hoping to do is to go beyond what Joe Tippins had done, which is a onesie, to how many people out there have similar stories to tell. And there's hundreds of them. Now there's tens of thousands. So a lot of the people in the case reports, and I've got 22 case reports in the book that are by no means all of them. They're the ones that I thought were the most interesting and informative, um, that cover the cancers that are most frequent in humans. The Lost my train of thought. Um,
So I could ask a question.
yeah,
So um, some of the people in the community, the quote community, think that once your cancer is under control, you should cut this thing to 4 days a week because there are some sort of consequences for taking it chronically every single day. Is that correct or not?
I don't know. I mean, I think, the 222 milligram dose is more superstition than parametric lead determined. So that's the 222 milligrams is the dose for a 10-pound dog to deworm it. So somehow that got into the conventional wisdom that that's like a starting dose. And for all other, because we don't know, we need the parametric data to say, 100 milligrams is all you need, or you need 1,000. In the book, I talk about all the different case reports that have come in and what can we learn from it. I call it a community clinical trial where there are so many variables that are uncontrolled in terms of the subject, what else they're taking, their circumstances, the cancer. What is the common feature? And the common feature in all the case reports is the presence or absence of fenbendazole. So, to my way of thinking, everything else doesn't matter.
You're
So
Bill,
whether,
you're a real scientist. I'm
oh yeah,
not. I here's my philosophy is the same as Paul Merrick's. He says that 1,000 anecdotes becomes data, and I say 1,000 anecdotes becomes proof. You don't need, and from then on, fancy studies, as you're alluding to, are actually unethical.
they actually are because you need a control group.
Yeah.
And the control group is certain death. So when you have a proven cure, in my mind, like fenbendazole, it's unethical to have a control group. And the beauty of fenbendazole, it's not people sometimes will say, well, so I know where I was going before. So a lot of the people in the case reports had given traditional medicine a try. They basically, you run out of time. We can't give you any more chemo. You can't have any more radiation. They kind of pat you on the head and say, go get your affairs in order. Sorry, right? So basically, you're at the end of the line.
We're
That's
done. We're done
yeah,
extracting money from your insurance plan.
yeah. I wouldn't say that. I mean, I'm not.
I
I think
would.
yeah.
I'm more
Um,
cynical than you are. I've had to put up with this stuff
okay,
as a
yeah.
physician. Anyway, go
I,
ahead. Sorry.
I'm new to it. But so they were more or less given up for dead. So fenbendazole or any alternative treatment was their only shot. So they had nothing to lose. And lo and behold, they're cured. So these are people who were most likely in the throes of what are known as cancer stem cells. So the reason why cancer kills people is that the first go around, traditional therapy will get rid of a lot of the cells and you'll go into remission. But what it does is it creates a supercell, a cancer stem cell that is not susceptible to the drugs that they're using. So uh, it's not only resistant to that drug, it's resistant to other drugs that are similar to it. So they call it multi-drug resistance. So now there's no treatment for that, comes back, kills the person. So the cancer stem cells after treatment, whether they're caused by the treatment or just a function of time having cancer, we don't know. The oncology profession would say it's a function of the cancer, not of the drugs.
You call it a profession, I call it a scam. The
Yeah,
radiation oncologists, I don't know how they look at themselves in the mirror. They have only one entity that improves mortality, one entity for which their therapy improves mortality. And as far as the chemotherapy goes, there's about five or six that improve mortality, supposedly out of the hundreds or whatever there are of numbers of cancer.
mhm.
I mean, it's
Right,
sick, and they are scamps, every one
right.
of them.
Well, I think if you're looking at, like the absolute success rate, it's close to zero. I mean, it's not worth bothering. It's not worth the expense or the side effects. And
It's
that's
worse than
where
that. It kills people.
it does kill people. And I hate to say that because certainly some cancer does kill people, but I think more people die of the traditional treatment than the cancer itself. That if they were not to do treatment, they would live longer.
Like all of medicine, it is a net mortality loss.
Yeah,
The whole entire oncology thing, and it's probably the second most expensive therapy after mental health, if you include the long-term costs of institutionalization.
right, right. And one thing I don't want to get lost in the message today is that what happened in the past is the past. The hope that we have for the future, we need to enlist the oncology profession
Yeah, fat
to
chance.
start no to start using these repurposed drugs, mebendazole, ivermectin. There's a bunch of them that have no downside, no side effects to help them save their patients. It doesn't mean that there's no redeeming value at all to any of these traditional drugs. I'll get to that in a minute. But there's no reason that for any woman who currently has breast cancer to add a fenbendazole kicker to this. There's no downside. And the beauty is if the oncologist won't do it, the patients should be. The patients now are empowered through the Right to Try Act that Trump passed to treat themselves. And if the oncologist won't, they'll be bystanders. Because what will happen eventually is that the people will say, well, I cured my cancer. I don't know if it was the fenbendazole or the traditional treatment. And then there'll be self-treating where people don't even go to the oncologist. They just self-treat and say, look, it's gone, which is what the case reports are starting to show. So obviously the empire, big cancer fights back. So the first three case reports in my Substack, my mother-in-law, a prostate cancer case, and a melanoma case, were all written up and published by Dr. Makis, Ilse Bagley, and Perrick Martinez in case reports in oncology. Last year, in I think about May or June of 2025. Well, that paper just got retracted.
Yeah,
Not
I'll bet it
not
did.
be, not because of scientific merit, but because I know that I interacted directly with Eric Martinez, who did all the work on that. I gave him access with the permission of the case reports to all their medical records that I had, and then the people in the case reports gave him more information. So it's all legitimate medical records. The reason they retracted the article was not because of scientific merit, but because Dr. Makis, sorry, didn't disclose that he treats patients with fenbendazole, which is an undisclosed financial interest. Well,
No, it's not.
there
He
would
doesn't
there
make any
would
money on that.
right there would be no published papers in oncology if that was the standard. Everybody is making money on these drugs that they publish on. So anyway, they needed a BS reason to retract the paper, and they did because it was getting a lot of traction. That's why. So now the book is out. It's got, 22 case reports that are very detailed. And now we're finding out that pharma knew about the power of fenbendazole for a long time. And in the book, when I started the book, I was like 95% sure that fenben was the real deal as far as a legitimate cure for cancer. And by cure, I mean it doesn't come back. Whether you need to continue taking it or not is a subject to debate, should be researched. But as far as I know, people continue to take it because either it's superstition, they don't want to rock the boat, they don't want to tempt fate. I don't know. As long as they have no side effects from it, why not? Why tease the dog? You're going to
So
make
Fenben is bought by the ton in India. Is that correct, or is it another one
well.
for
Fenben
deworming their
is
entire wormy population at
right. That's a
intervals
whole nother topic
every
that
six
I
months?
right.
But
That's
this is how safe it is. They just practically
right.
put it in the drinking water.
Right. So you could do that, but also it comes in 50-pound bags to throw on cattle feed. So that's in terms of, whether one brand is better than the other. It's too cheap to counterfeit. What you would counterfeit it with is going to be more expensive than the actual product. So, people worry about, gee, am I getting the best stuff? Is it 96% pure? Is it 100% pure? Really doesn't matter. I mean, it's kind of like if it works, it works.
So
So
what year did you parachute into this topic?
what?
What year was it that you parachuted into this topic? What year did you what year?
2021.
2021.
2021.
Got it.
So but like I said, as a result of doing the Substack, I had access to all the new case report information. I did, I felt I knew everything there was to know about fenben, the science. A lot of the really interesting research is not coming out of the US, it's coming out of China because they're not captured the way we are. So the, the, the future of fenbendazole research and anti-parasitic research is not going to be in the US unless things change. China, India, that's where it's all coming from. Vietnam, places like that. So you, as a result of my book, I think there's going to be a lot of fake counterscience that comes out trying to argue that fen-ben is dangerous. Well, and drugs like it are dangerous. Good luck with that because, like you alluded to before, it's an anti-parasitic. And so I use fenbendazole, albendazole, mebendazole, oxybendazole.
Interchangeably.
They're all, as far as the cancer
They they
aspect of it.
they had a molecule, mebendazole had a molecule added so they could patent it and make it
Yeah,
expensive.
yeah. They're all basically the same. And so in places like India and 122 other countries, they have a mass drug administration program as part of a public health initiative to control parasites. So they twice a year, most of them do twice a year. In India, they actually have a national deworming day twice a year, February 10th and August 10th. Hallmark probably makes a card for it. Okay. So where they deworm the population
We don't
with,
have worms over in America, do we?
yeah.
Right.
So they do that
Think of those
twice a year.
wormy Indians.
Right. So that, and it's always in the developed or the developed, undeveloped third world, which happens to be poor. Now, contrast that with the US. Anyway, so what I found is that if you do, this was one of the more amazing things that I found in the book. So you have all this pre-existing data out there that the WHO collects on cancer incidence rates around the world. And if you look at India and the US as a starting point, which is what I did in one of the Substacks, India has a cancer rate that is 1/3 the rate of the US. So in India, it's about 93 cases per year per 100,000 people. In the US, it's about 333 per 100,000 per year. There's a lot of differences between India and the US in terms of genetics, diet, geography, detection mechanisms, and risk factors. So you say, that's interesting, but there's one difference that's very peculiar that's never been studied, and that's differential anti-parasitic use to deworm the population, which they do in India. They have a low cancer rate, and we don't do here, and we have a high cancer rate. Now, when you look at the entire world and you parse it in terms of countries that do have a deworming program versus those that don't, the cancer rate is twice as high in the countries that don't, which means they don't use anti-parasitics like fenbendazole and albendazole and mebendazole on the population. So when you look at the whole world, when you look at the 123 nations that do deworm the population and they have a low cancer rate, their genetics, geography, diet, risk factors are all very different. The only thing that's common is the anti-parasitic use. So, and if you look at, so that to me was clearly so obvious that if you're a public health epidemiologist and you don't see that, something's wrong. And it's probably being ignored on purpose because it is a high school student could have seen that in the data. Now, if you parse the data even further, and I'm by no means an epidemiologist, but this is a career of research for someone. If you look at the Middle East, a geographically homogeneous region that is comprised of 23 countries, between Africa and the Middle East, and you look at is there any differential cancer anti-parasitic use there? The only country that doesn't deworm the population is Israel. Their cancer rate is twice the average rate in all the other Middle Eastern countries.
Wow.
Clearly, it's the use of anti-parasitics that is causing the difference in the cancer rate. So to your point before, does fenbendazole and drugs like it prevent cancer? Absolutely. It's in the data. It's in the epidemiological data. And there's another mechanism through which it can prevent cancer, which is what you alluded to before. Does the US have parasites? Yes. It's a myth that we don't, that we're clean. I mean, we have as many parasites, as many people are infected here as in India. We just don't treat it for whatever reason.
What's the
So
dose? What's the deworming dose? How many
for
days and how many?
albendazole, it's 400 milligrams twice a year. So, and they give that to kids primarily, but also targeted at-risk populations.
Is the Fenben equivalent dosing?
I don't know.
Okay.
Because it's an animal
So
parasitic.
that's all you do. You don't have to do it for a week or anything like that. You don't have to do it at weekly intervals times three because of the cysts or anything like that. You just take 400 milligrams twice a year and that's it.
That's enough to, as a shotgun method of public health,
Yes.
that lowers the cancer rate by 50%.
So
Imagine,
do you take this stuff
well, let me finish.
monthly or weekly?
I'll get to that. So imagine if you targeted at-risk populations, the elderly, people who had immunocompromised situations, people currently who have cancer. You would lower the cancer rate dramatically. So that's just a shotgun method, primarily effect that's going after children. So, India does deworm adults on a restricted basis, but for the most part, people have access to the drugs. So it's preventing cancer as well. So there's a reason why we don't acknowledge that we have a parasite problem in the US. So parasites are everywhere. You know, they're in our food, they're in the soil. Your pet, if you have a dog, you are infected. We deworm our dog twice a year, but people kiss their dog. The dog is a parasite delivery vehicle.
Lips
And
that
the same
touch dog lips will never touch mine.
right. The same parasites that infect the dog infect you, and most people don't realize that. So we're infected. We get infected through our food. Sushi's a big thing. Undercooked food, organic vegetables. It's in the animals defecate the parasite eggs out. So you can kill the parasites, but we can't kill the eggs. And the eggs are everywhere. So we, as Americans, and as the rich Western world, are infested with parasites, but we don't treat them. Well, what's the effect of that? Well, the parasites have designed their biology to be undetectable. So they change how the immune system reacts to their presence. And so if it was a super threshold event, you would know that you have a problem. Parasites are usually subclinical inflammation. Well, inflammation is the biggest driver of cancer, chronic, low-grade inflammation. If you have a parasitic infection that is never treated, never recognized, never understood, that's a major risk for cancer that if you compare and contrast different types of data, that may give you a 50% greater risk of getting cancer compared to the other countries that use anti-parasitics. So you have a two-pronged mechanism through which anti-parasitics can lower the cancer rate. One is the direct effect of killing cancer cells that are fomenting by attacking the microtubule and 10 other mechanisms. Two, by removing a major unrecognized cancer risk factor in the form of chronic parasitic-induced inflammation. So you've got this 1-2 punch that should say, in the US, we should have a public health initiative to provide anti-parasitics to the population to, one, lower chronic undiagnosed inflammation, and two, snuff out any incipient cancer cells. That would change the landscape of cancer diagnoses in a major way because what we've been doing isn't working. We're getting more and more people diagnosed with cancer every year, despite, everybody putting on sunscreen, everybody getting screened. You know, I'm not talking about COVID at all, which is a whole nother nightmare. Um, as an environmental variable that is increasing the cancer rate. But something that would be cheap, safe, effective, start having a public health policy to take antiparasitics. And if India can do it, we can do it. And it's cheap. I mean, the pharmaceutical companies provide these drugs for nothing. They cost pennies. They're not expensive to make. Certainly it makes a lot more sense to do public health prevention of a ubiquitous pathogen like a parasite versus having these elaborate, expensive, invasive vaccination programs that only treat seasonal and sporadic injury. It's just a common sense thing. But, I know common sense doesn't really register with some people, but that's what I want to see happen. And you asked me about prevention. Well, you don't really know because it's hard to prove a negative. Like if I take Fenben from here on out, I would never know whether would have gotten cancer anyway, right? So, but I know that it prevents cancer because of the differential epidemiological data. That is powerful. And what's beautiful about it is it was collected innocently, naively, without bias. The WHO, from now on, probably won't even collect the data. So it's all WHO data. They had no reason to fabricate, massage, or otherwise mess with it. It's out there. Now it could be disappeared, but it's it's so blatantly obvious what the differential cause is that it's hard to say that it's being. I'm no Einstein. If I could figure it out,
No,
someone else.
you're a real geek. You're
Yeah.
you're a very bright guy. I mean,
But
I've done a brain biopsy on you in the last 30 minutes, and I know you've got an IQ north of
yeah, you could probably see
140.
right through to see the parrots there, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway, so I started to say before when I started doing the Substack, it was kind of a labor of love, and it's kind of like paying it forward. Let other people know, but basically to help us not have to chew our cabbage all the same time, we can just refer people to the Substack, and that really took off.
How
So
many subscribers do you have now?
there's about 3 million. So
That's impossible.
I don't charge.
You
So
don't have 3 million on Substack.
they because I don't charge, they don't publish that.
You sure?
Positive.
Holy moly. You're the number one guy on Substack, if
I don't
that's
want to be
true.
the I don't want to be the number one guy.
You are
They don't.
the
They
biggest.
don't
What?
because what their business model is, right?
Well,
So
I'm a Substack author. I know all about it.
yeah, so I don't charge. So I don't want to piss them off. So
Well, it
anyway,
won't piss them off. They'll be happy if you make money because they'll make money. They'll make 10% of whatever you get.
I know, but I think I don't. I'm never going to charge. So I'm not doing this for any money.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
like I have no connection to this or to these people. Operation Wellness. It used to be All Family Pharmacy. Um, people ask me about topical. You can
So
get this on
people
Amazon.
people do they do get paid subscriptions for your BenFin. They don't.
No, no,
You
I've
you
never.
turned that off.
Yeah, so I think that's why it's so popular is, what's my incentive? I'm paying it forward from my mother-in-law. And then now there's an army of people out there who have been cured in their world who are out spreading the word. And that's what I want people to do. It's hard to believe, but what I started to say before is you have to see it for yourself. and everybody knows somebody with cancer now, and there's no harm, and it's not going to compete with any traditional therapy. They want to live, you want them to live. Suggest fenbendazole. Ivermectin, story's still out on that. Different, it's got a lot of mechanisms, but it's approved for humans. Fenben is an animal drug. You can buy it yourself on Amazon, costs a few cents per dose. But what really convinced me that Fenben was the real deal, in addition to the science and all the case reports coming in, as a result of doing the research on the book, there was a paper from 2002. Fenben's been rediscovered like every 2 years, and then it just goes silent. Every 20 years, sorry, every 20 years. So in 2002, there was a new paper that came out in Case Reports in Oncology by some Indian author, Murkapathy. And what was unique about it is it was looking at mebendazole as a potential repurposed cancer drug. And they looked, preclinical work, petri dish, in vivo stuff on a bunch of different human cancers implanted into mice and rats. So it worked as we know it works. It's an amazing substance. But in the discussion, they said this is the first time that this has been demonstrated, that mebendazole, or a drug like it, has had these potent anti-cancer capabilities. And I was thinking, no, I think I just read an article from 1976 that claimed the same thing. So I went back to the 1976 article, and it didn't register for me at the time when I read it. But when I went back with that new knowledge from 2002 that they're claiming primacy, that they had named the 1976 drug oncodazole. So that kind of tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah.
So to rename fenbendazole oncodazole tells you they knew exactly what it did. And the way science works is it's not a linear thing. Like you can imagine, I read about this in the book. You can imagine, do you know what the far side is?
Yes.
So that's not far off. So being a scientist, they're very nerdy and interesting, but the way they all behave the same. So when you have a new discovery, doesn't matter what the field is, you just don't do one thing in series. You tend to branch out and you're doing multiple experiments, and you're looking at everything all at once. It's kind of like Christmas. You can open up all your presents at the same time, not just one at a time, as a scientist. So you can be looking at something that cures cancer in a petri dish. Does it cure it in animals? How about my friends? What's going to happen to them? There's no side effects in the animals.
So
So
cancer is traditionally thought of as very heterogeneous. Is this real? I mean, you just say cancer as if it's all one thing and it works for every cancer. Is that true?
every solid tumor cancer. The
So
jury's still out on blood cancers. So
lymphomas and
so any solid tumor cancer, they all share the same thing. And that's why, so anyway, when I put two and two together and I saw the word oncodazole, I knew that in 1976 they knew. And they were bold enough and excited enough, you know, science-y enough to get over enthusiastic and to name it what it actually did.
Bill, this is the sickest part of your entire sick story.
Yeah, no, it
I mean,
even
it's
gets,
horrible. It's just
yeah,
horrible. I mean,
yeah.
I'm
Well,
just stunned by all the stuff I learn every freaking week about how
well,
we're
you
being
you you
taken
better take
advantage
an
of.
antiemetic because it gets better. So,
I take that daily. Sorry, go ahead.
so, so it's damning enough that they named it Oncodisol. It's kind of like if you had a new weapon and it was called Tank Destroyer, you know exactly what it is. Oncodisol, it's a anti-parasitic that deals with cancer, cures cancer. So in 1984, now that I had all my research and I was doing this, I went to another paper and it said it had changed the name. It was looking at the pharmacological effects of this in some other system, but they had changed the name. They put it in parentheses, NoCo-disol, NOCO-disol. So they were changing the name um, from oncodisol to nocodisol for no apparent reason.
Somebody got to him.
Somebody got to them. Why did they change the name to nocodisol? Why are they trying to hide it? Why did the 2002 paper not cite the 1976 oncodisol paper?
The stuff would have destroyed vast markets.
Right. But also, as a scientist, I know how papers are written. If a source isn't available to be cited, it's basically erased from memory. So because the 2002 paper on mebendazole didn't cite the 1976 oncodisol paper, I knew it had to be not available to be cited because there were three parties that would have caught it. One was the scientists. They were very prominent. They worked with MD Anderson in the University of Texas, kind of right in the belly of the beast. So they published this. They didn't cite that paper. The reviewers of the 2002 paper didn't catch it either. Because when you say it's a new thing, that's a bold statement. You better be sure that you are the true discoverer, that this hasn't been discovered before. And three, because it was in Clinical Case Reports in Oncology, which is like the premier journal for all oncologists in the world, not one oncologist in the world who would have read that paper said, no, no, I've read this before. They called it oncodisol. So the claim of primacy is damning in that it wasn't available to be cited. Well, how can that be? Well, what happened was the people who were trying to change the name and suppress the paper could not have anticipated the internet. So what happened was when, when I was a scientist in the 80s and 90s, you had to go to the stacks to look up
Right.
new references. There was no
Stacks was
internet.
these vast,
Yeah.
vast printed things in major universities.
So they're all paper like behind you.
Yeah.
So you have to go to the stacks, and there were only so many medical libraries. So if you were affiliated with a university, you were fine. But if not, you didn't have that access. So what happened in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, was all paper journals became digital. So the oncodisol paper that I found, which I actually have the cover page printed in the book because that could disappear somehow. I actually paid for the copyright to have a financial paper trail
How
that it
much
did
that cost?
exist.
How much that?
125,
Oh my,
$125.
that's outrageous.
So, but I had to do it because it's so
It's important.
crazy. Yeah. So anyway, what I think happened was the um, the journal was just the specific article was either just downplayed or physically removed. But when someone digitized this, it's called communications in, I have it here, hang on. Communications in um, biophysics and biophysiology. Anyway, it's in the book. They actually took pictures of like you'll notice some journals, they digitize the text. This one happened to have just a PDF, an image
Screenshot.
screenshot. So they just took pictures of it. So it's not, it's hard to index that. So I'm still not sure how I found it. A lot of weird things happen with this book, but that's one of them. So oncodisol was wiped from memory. But here's the sickening part, and get your puke bag ready. The the blockbuster chemotherapy drugs, the vinca alkaloids, the taxanes, are based on the mechanism of fenben. So those drugs are microtubule stabilizers. Fenben disrupts microtubules. they're operating in the same space. So the chemotherapy drugs that made little pharma, big pharma are knockoffs of drugs like fenbendazole.
You're a real scientist. How big is your bibliography?
Maybe 40 paper. I'm a neuroscientist, so I did
Yeah,
brain
yeah.
behavior, um, um, learning and memory, single unit analyses, um, um, neuroanatomy, neuroanatomical tracing, but I'm trained as a psychologist. But back then, the Society for Neuroscience just invented the term neuroscientist. That included physiological psychologists,
Yeah, yeah.
neurophysiologists. So it's kind of like jack of all trades in brain research, but primarily behavior. So I studied the brainstem mechanisms of learning and memory, primarily the role of the cerebellum.
You,
So,
which university were you affiliated with?
well, I went to Dartmouth and then I was at the University of Vermont.
I went to Dartmouth briefly. Like
Oh, no
I
kidding.
got kicked out of my dermatology program. I
Okay.
was an annoying young man.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my first interaction with psoriasis was at Dick's house. Do you remember that? That was like the student infirmary.
Yeah, yeah.
And that got me down my vitamin D path of where they couldn't fix my psoriasis because I was vitamin D deficient. I didn't know it at the time. And then when we would come down here, my in Florida, my psoriasis would clear up and the whole vitamin D thing started. So that's the next book.
So how much vitamin D do you have to take to keep your level at 110?
Well, I take 10,000 a day.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
but
it.
I'm in the sun, but my skin, as I'm almost 70, only makes 20% of the vitamin D per unit time that it did when I was 20. So I think the loss of ability to make vitamin D by your skin is essentially a built-in death mechanism. So you have to supplement as you get older. Doesn't matter how tan you are, how much sun you get, you're not getting enough.
That's a real
And,
insight. Thank you.
yeah. So um, you're in California, right? So
Yeah.
you're pretty tan. You gotta supplement. Or, in my book, I look at the role of vitamin D in longevity, and I do comparison among long-lived and short-lived animals, and the difference is vitamin D.
Wow.
So it's an amazing treatment of what's so obvious after the fact that has been totally suppressed. So anyway, that's a whole nother area. So the whole oncodisol thing, pharmacologists might say, well, there's significant differences between the standard of care chemotherapy drugs and fenben. And I would say, yeah, the main difference is fenben has no side effects and your drugs do. And the reason why that is you can't see it until you have a cure, because you could see how a cure works and why other things don't. So the heuristic value of something like fenben and why oncologists have such a hard time with it in their diagnostics and understanding is in their lexicon, they don't have the concept of a cure. And it it's true. It changes how you interpret your diagnostics and interprets the game plan that you have. And for the patient, it determines their outlook. And your outlook is a big part of this. It's not that there's a placebo effect. It's that you can either help yourself get better or you can get in the way. And it explains the phenomenon of people who, oh, I just found out I have cancer. I have 3 months to live. Then they die the next day, or they die around the 3 months. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. In psychology, it's known as voodoo death. Your mind can make you healthy, but it can also kill you. But in the book, I put in 3 case reports from dogs whose whose owners cured them of cancer. Because one, it's an animal anti-parasitic, so it should cure cancer in dogs, which it does. But also to show that it can't possibly be a placebo effect because dogs they're not subject to a placebo effect. So So that served two purposes. One, to show that it should work in animals, which it does, and two, can't possibly be some complex cognitive effect explaining it, wishful thinking, or anything else. So side effects. So fenbendazole has no side effects because it completely and selectively kills the
I'm
parasite.
taking chlorine dioxide at 45-minute intervals.
Okay.
So that's just parenthetical. I just want to tell you what's going on.
Okay. Yeah. So the difference between the standard of care drugs and fenben and bendazole is lack of side effects in fenben. The reason why there's no side effects is because the while they both might work uh, attacking microtubules. So, like I said before, the standard of care drugs will freeze the microtubules as the cell's dividing so that it can't divide. So they're called microtubule stabilizers. Fenben just goes in, melts the microtubules, and the cell dies for a number of different reasons. But if for whatever reason Fenben doesn't kill the cell by the microtubule, it will prevent it from uh, establishing a blood supply. It will disrupt the glucose metabolism. It'll prevent it from transitioning to the Warburg effect. It'll block all these immune things like molecular mimicry. So one thing that happens in parasites and cancer cells is that they hide among the normal cells. So the immune system can't pick them out. And the mechanisms they use are being exploited by things like Keytruda and other immune checkpoint inhibitors to kind of make the immune system to expose those cancer cells, remove the cloaking device so that the traditional cancer treatment can kill those. But Fenben does that on its own. It it disrupts the tumor microenvironment. So, like you said before, cancer cells are heterogeneous. They're just not one type of cell. They evolve over time. And if you don't kill them all at once, if you just piss them off with a traditional chemotherapy, they come back really pissed and they kill the person. So they become immune to that particular drug. So this doesn't work anymore. So that's called uh, drug resistance, but it also generalizes to other drugs as well, but not fenben. So fenben is a very unique molecule. So it blocks molecular mimicry and it doesn't allow the tumor microenvironment to become highly acidic, which protects the tumor. Temperature, the tumor is warmer than the surrounding tissue. And there's even some new data to suggest that the bioelectric uh, fields are different in a tumor versus normal cells. So fenben prevents all that. And there's defense mechanisms that are basically like if you think of the cancer cell as a ship and you poke a hole in it, there's like bilge pumps. They're called uh, P glycoprotein efflux pumps. Basically, they pump out toxins from the cell to protect it, whether it's a parasite or a cancer cell. Fenben blocks all those pumps. And there are some traditional standard of care drugs that do that as well, but kind of like a sloppy knockoff of fenben. And then they block migration, like I talked about before. Fenben blocks migration. And fenben, there's also something known as oncogenes, and there's a bunch of them, but P53 is the main oncogene. And oncogenes kind of give cancer cells their immortality. So if there's a disrupted P53 gene, the cell, even though it's defective and it doesn't belong there, it won't self-destruct because the cancer disables the self-destruct mechanism in the form of the P53 gene. So the P53 gene is known as the guardian of the genome so that we don't have those things. But once you have active cancer, the cancer disables those defense mechanisms that are normally there. Fenben kills the cell, whether it's got a functioning or malfunctioning p53 gene, no matter what. So the reason why, and let me answer my own question, the reason why Fenben is effective and these standard of care drugs are not is that Fenben, through the 11 different mechanisms that I just went through, kills the cell using simultaneously multiple redundant mechanisms. It takes no prisoners. There are no survivors when Fenben comes through and targets and kills these cells. Whereas with the sloppy knockoffs, whether it's by design, uh, or just bad luck, they kill off only the receptive cells, the most vulnerable, and leave the cells that are not receptive to the microtubule disruption because they're just one-trick pony drugs. So then, because that's all they have in their quiver, those cells come back, multiply, and kill the patient. So the most reasonable, humane, common sense thing to do for anybody who is going through any type of cancer treatment is take Fenben. What do you have to lose? You can either choose to survive under your own care or die under a doctor's. And that's really what it comes down to. It's cheap. You get the stuff on Amazon. There's no side effects. Um, don't take it with acetaminophen. Acetaminophen is a primary liver toxin.
Don't take acetaminophen for any reason whatsoever. It
Right,
should never have been approved.
right.
I mean, compare
So,
aspirin is very safe. It has many positive things, and it's acetaminophen is just terrible.
yeah,
A
so,
Tylenol.
but it's hidden in everything, so you have to be
Yeah.
careful. There's a mouse data study out there suggesting that uh, fenbendazole and acetaminophen together can cause some liver issues. But I'll talk about liver issues in a minute if you have time.
We've got plenty
Um,
of time.
okay. So, um, standard of care chemotherapy drugs appear to be knockoffs of fenbendazole. So that's the sickening part of this. Um, Big Cancer will come back and say, no, that's not true. They are different in X, Y, and Z, but fundamentally, that is a true statement. Um, I guess my feeling is prove it otherwise. So what I said before about you can't understand why uh, things don't work until you understand how something that does work works. So when you have a cure like Fenben, you can look at and say, well, how come Fenben works so well and these standard of cancer drugs don't? Because they're very similar. Well, the multimodal action of Fenben is why. Fenben kills them 11 different ways, no survivors. The knockoff drugs are one-trick ponies. The cancer cells that don't die on first pass come back with a vengeance. So most people in traditional chemotherapy will initially go into remission, and then it's kind of like, yeah, I'm in remission now, but then it comes back and kills them. There's nothing that they can do. That's traditional pattern. Very few people are cured by traditional chemotherapy. The oncologists will tell you, I can't cure you, but I can give you more time. Well, yeah, you can cure them, give them some Fenben. So that's, and I'm not saying they're bad people, they just don't know about it. So the whole oncodazole thing, I have a chapter in the book, why doesn't my doctor, if fenbendazole is so great, how come my doctor doesn't know about it? Well, they're victims of the deception just like we are. So the ball's in their court. The ball is in the government's court. Um, the Like I said in the beginning, there's a real cure for cancer here, and it's scientifically validated. This is, this is not some fringe thing. This has been being rediscovered many times over, and the time is right now for this nonsense to stop. People have to realize that, yeah, something sounds too good to be true, but you've been duped. I mean, I saw it firsthand with my mother-in-law. There's an army of people out there who have been cured by fenbendazole who are telling other people. The response of the government should not to be, well, we need to regulate Fenben. because people could hurt themselves. No, the safety data is impeccable. They give it away like candy in other countries. You can't argue that it's unsafe when billions of doses every year are given out to the rest of the world like candy.
It's hard to
So,
regulate when you can get a 50-pound sack of this stuff.
right, right. So, but they'll figure out a way. So that doesn't mean that there's not an opportunity for big pharma to jump into this, and there's going to be a huge first mover advantage. You can either fight this and keep the status quo, or you can say there's an opportunity here. I already said we don't know the appropriate dose. We don't know if there's any cofactors. We don't know what the best way to take it is. So I had somebody, organic chemist, write in a comment and say, I was telling people, my mother-in-law took it originally with yogurt. Now we're thinking olive oil. And I'm careful to say, I tell people what other people are doing. I'm not a doctor. I don't recommend anything because I don't know. I just know what other people are doing. If I had cancer, I could tell people, well, when I had cancer, this is what I did. And, that's another thing is the psychological weight of knowing that there's a cure for cancer. It's unbelievable. I mean, it is, um, I don't know, I don't know how to put it into words because it's something that I think as you get older, you worry about it, and it's like the people around you, especially since COVID vaccines, everybody has cancer now, turbo cancer. My mother-in-law had turbo cancer. Remind me to get back to that later. So you're thinking, when is my number going to come up? With something like Fenben, my wife who's had DCIS 20 years ago, she's not really worried about it.
DCIS is a fraudulent diagnosis. Their mortality figures at 20 years or 10 years are identical to people without DCIS.
Mhm.
DCIS is a psyop.
Right. And we knew that instinctively 20 plus years ago.
It's a cervical, just for the listeners, it's a cervical slight abnormality in the pap smears, right?
Right. Right. So
Yeah.
she took tamoxifen, and loved it. And we also started high dose vitamin D at the time.
Yeah.
So she's never had a problem since. And, but the surgeon, their response was, radical mastectomy. And it's like, whoa,
Right.
we're
Sorry, I
definitely,
got I got it wrong. It's not cervical, it's breast.
yeah, yeah.
And
But
yeah.
anyway, so other than age, we don't really have any risk factors. And I'm not sure about the genetic component to cancer anymore. I'm kind of rethinking everything, um, whether there is a link. So there
Frankly, if
could
you
be,
ever hear genetics, you just think this is fraud. Forget it.
right, right. Sorry about that. Somebody tried to call me. Um, yeah. So anyway, the um, I'm gonna have to keep a note. I lose my train of thought. Um, what was I talking about?
Well, it's all right. Let me ask a question. Do you consider using Fenbid prophylactically? Do you take it every day or every week?
Well, what we do, again, it's hard to prove a negative. But if you look at the shotgun haphazard approach of how third world countries are using it apparently as a preventative, that's twice a year, a 400 milligram dose of albendazole. That's that cuts the cancer rate in half. Um, that's like the bare minimum. And you never know if anybody in that group would have ever gotten cancer, but
Do you
because of
personally
it,
take it every week?
what my wife and I do is we do 3 consecutive days, the 222 milligrams per day, once every 3 months. So, and we sprinkle it on buttered toast. So that's where I was going with the organic chemist. She said, best thing for this to help enhance absorption would be butter because it's a carbon 14 molecule and it will help, with absorption and all that sort of stuff. I don't understand it. I figured, hey, somebody cared enough to give me some insight. So we sprinkle it on heavily buttered toast. It's like a white powder. It kind of looks like powdered sugar or cornstarch. And you could see where if you put it in water, it's just going to go to the sides. So it's very hydrophobic. So in terms of big pharma capitalizing on this, come up with insured delivery vehicle, show how how the blood serum levels are adequate. Do the parametric work that needs to be done. You can patent that. You could charge for that, but do something that works, not that tortures people,
Probably won't work. Probably won't be any better than just taking a pill.
Probably
So
not.
while we're on the subject, and we're not on the subject, our vet tells us to give our 160-pound dog like 15 or 18 of these 225 Fenbens all at once.
Yeah.
So is that necessary to get rid of the dog's parasites, or can he take a little less? He never complains. He watches us eat pills, and he loves to eat pills because he thinks they're tasty.
Well, I don't know, but it's as far as speaking to what a human should do, it shows you that the, there's a saying that the difference between medicine and poison is the dose. It shows you that
It's
the
non-toxic.
dose, yeah, it's not toxic. So it's the 222 milligram dose per day is going to be proven in the future to be um, probably more than enough because Fenben is so toxic to the cancer cells. And that people who are taking high doses, all right, it's probably administration error. So they take a high dose to ensure that a minimum dose gets in. Most of it's wasted, not absorbed, passes right through first pass absorption or whatever it is. So there's going to be a way to optimize the dose, the administration, so that you know what you're getting. Right now it's haphazard, but it's working. It's doing better than traditional chemotherapy. So you can't argue with the results. The proof is in the pudding. So we started to talk about the liver before. So there was a couple, scary papers out on Google that are, if you type in fenbendazole and cancer, this one particular paper comes up on Google that says, oh, don't take it because it causes liver damage. So it's interesting that that's the first paper that comes up. Nothing happens by accident. Clearly, that's
Jesus.
being, promoted, but it's effective. So what we found with my mother-in-law is kind of something very interesting with liver enzymes. So liver enzymes, and again, I'm not an MD, I'm not a liver doctor or hepatologist or whatever, herpetologist, snake person. But anyway, so the two main liver enzymes, ALT and AST, um, are an indicator, a quick and dirty indicator of stress to the liver. So when they go up, as they do with many drugs and sicknesses and instances where the body is being stressed, it's infection with an infection, that'll go up as an indicator of liver stress. So as more stuff and junk is in your blood, it has to pass through the liver to be eliminated. So as the liver enzymes go up, that's kind of like a meter that the liver is working hard. Well, what we found with my mother-in-law, which is consistent with a number of people, is that, you know, when she was being, uh, when she was a cancer patient being treated by herself, she still had access to diagnostics through her oncologist. And they would do typical blood work. And it wasn't done on a experimental schedule. It was done on a clinical schedule, like once a month, once every 2 weeks. So you're not doing a study, it's you're being a patient. So what we did is we went back and we plotted her AST and ALT values as a function of time in conjunction with her blood tumor marker, which is a measure of the degree of cancer. It has plus and minuses, but that's what we did. So what we found was that when she started, uh, I should probably have that, but anyway, when she started the Fenben, her blood tumor marker was 316, and then within that first 2 month period, she was getting blood tests as well. So her liver numbers were normal to start before she had started taking Fenben. Then they popped up to normal is under 30 for both of them, I think, raw numbers. But then they popped up to like 150, 160 for both of them, which is, out of normal range. But then a curious thing happened is even though she continued to take Fenben and the cancer was going away, her liver numbers started to drop and have been normal ever since. So what I think happened was the transient rise in the ALT and AST as measures of liver stress were actually detecting the die-off of the cancer cells.
Wow.
As the cancer cells were being killed, that debris,
Stress the
cancer,
liver.
goes through the liver, drives up the number. So you could say, oh, you're taking Fenben and you're killing your liver. No, you're killing the cancer cells.
Wow.
So it's stuff like that in the face of a cure, you have a totally different interpretation of what's going on. So that is like this whole frontier of knowledge that's waiting to be found. And this isn't my expertise, right? Somebody who's an oncologist is probably thinking, son of a bitch, what about this? What about that? What about, here's another thing. So they couldn't believe that she was cancer free. So she got tested from here to kingdom come, right? So we know the cancer has to be in there. This is after a little bit of what her oncologist kind of changed his tune. But we know you have cancer, we just can't find it. So they would image the crap out of her. And it's like, Roberta, why are you going to get all these things? You don't have cancer. Well, my doctor this, my doctor that. So they could never find any solid tumors. So this is after she was taking the Fenben. So where was I going with that one?
I don't know, but it was instructive.
But anyway, so her liver numbers remained normal, even though she continued to take Fenben. So if Fenben was doing anything to the liver, you would expect it to be elevated from then on, as long as you're taking the Fenben. So
Right.
because it's a transient elevation, coincident with the active phase of the cancer killing, it's more likely to be related to increased liver work because of the cancer cells being killed and being cleared through the blood. So it's kind of like an indirect measure that Fenben's working if your liver numbers do transiently rise. That's not to say there could be some unknown idiosyncratic effect that's detrimental to someone. But for the most part, the science seems to suggest that it's pretty safe. And there are case reports where to treat persistent parasitic infections that people have taken it for years. Bendazole analogs, mebendazole, things like that. So there doesn't seem to be any habituation, tolerance, or lack of effect of the drug. So
Wow. That's incredible.
yeah, and you buy it on Amazon. That's the crazy thing. And it has no side effects. That's the crazier thing. And the standard of care drugs that are based on Fenben have all the side effects and none of the benefit that Fenben does. It's unbelievable. And then, yesterday, this paper coming out that, the CIA had in its possession a document showing that they knew in 1951 that the Russians knew in the 1930s that antiparasitics kill cancer.
Wow.
I'm going to give the CIA a pass on this one. I think it was just a low-level analyst that, they spy on everything and they don't know what has meaning until it does. So they just collect all this data and then it just got filed. And as a function of the document dump, someone was looking probably for like JFK stuff and they saw, oh, Fenben or, anti-parasitics cancer, and it kind of stuck in their craw and it didn't have any meaning until they read the book. And now it's like, I think I read something about that. So it's kind of like this happy accident that seems to be co-occurring around the world. I mean, what's interesting with the Substack, it's all over the world.
Yeah.
I mean, let me take a look.
I get hundreds of countries readers.
Yeah. I just happened to get this today. So I get dozens of these a day. Oslo, Norway, uh, talking about ivermectin and fenben in butter to get astonishing results. So they're doing this. So the metastases in the liver practically disappeared. Now it's not worth measuring on CT. One big remaining metastases was reduced to 45%. All this within just 2 months. The oncologist was elated, but does not know about the ivermectin fenben complementation yet. So uh, the all over the world.
So your people sometimes are taking both, but you've got doubts about the utility of ivermectin.
I should retract that because I don't know. And what I encourage people to do is if they think, eating fortune cookies helps them, go for it. There's nothing that's going to interfere with fenben. Um, so if they feel better, like they should take high dose vitamin D, you should have your immune system optimized. But if you want to take, people take all kinds of things, turkey tail mushrooms, it runs the gamut of what they want to take. Take whatever you want, as long as it doesn't interfere with fenben. And in the book, I have a couple things that I mean, one is an antacid that might potentiate the effect of fenben by preventing first pass metabolism by cutting down on some of the acid. But other than that, there's really no interactions. One caution is, pregnant women shouldn't take it because that's a whether whether the fetus is a parasite or not is a very complex question. And if cancer is a parasite and the fetus is a parasite, it could be a problem. So Merck, which makes fenben, um, specifically suggests that pregnant animals not be given it. In children, a lot of what's lacking is case reports involving children. And I know anecdotally that some physicians have treated patients with fenben who had intractable brain tumors to success. I haven't seen that written up, but that could be something that's kind of done, kind of like, don't tell anybody sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that's so that's kind of where we are. So the oncologists and cancer researchers are kind of in an interesting position. They can either fight this and say that fenben is dangerous, it's not clinically proven, we need more information, and they can stand on the sidelines for 20 years while the self-treating population proves it. Or they can get involved now and start to study this and take it seriously that cancer is done. We have a real cure. And I can't say that emphatically enough. And
Sounds like oncologists are done too.
I wouldn't say they're done.
Close.
You need somebody to manage your care. You need somebody who is on board with you. So one thing that I wanted to mention before, the guy from Norway saying, we haven't told our oncologist yet. So it's a real thing. So I did a Substack, how to tell your family, friends, and oncologists that you're self-treating with fenbendazole, because it's not, you don't know how somebody's going to react. And with an oncologist, what you don't want them to do is to say, well, if you're going to treat yourself, I'm not going to treat you, because you do need access to diagnostics. You need to know that it's working. Now there are, you can do blood tests on your own through LabCorp, and you can put the numbers into AI and it can tell you what it is, and the whole, if you put this stuff into AI, maybe it's because I've done it so many times with asking questions of AI that it has changed its tune, that Fenben is a legitimate cure. But so AI is kind of coming along. Um, so um, in the future of medicine with AI, with a semi-intelligent person can get a lot of
We don't
information.
need doctors. I
We
mean,
may
I have a
not,
friend that puts entire charts, an inch thick chart into AI, and you can do it with images. And she gets out these amazing uh, computations about what the results show.
right, right.
All the
So
labs, everything.
yeah, so the jury's still out as to whether people tell their doctors they're supplementing their traditional treatment with fenbendazole or ivermectin or mebendazole, whatever they want to do. But down here in Florida, we actually found a doctor who is sympathetic, who will assist and be for my mother-in-law, who knows that she cured herself with Fenben. She's 88, so you just don't. It doesn't cure every other disease. So she knows that she's no longer a cancer patient because that's the thing. You go into the hospital as an older person, and they see cancer, and cancer cures all other diseases. So I've had a couple case reports where people have cured their cancer with Fenben and have died from untreated, undiagnosed infections that could have been cured with antibiotics because the the doctor would not acknowledge the fact that it wasn't cancer.
Wow.
So when I say cancer cures all other diseases, it's analogous to how COVID cured the seasonal flu,
Yeah,
if you know what I mean by that.
yeah.
So once you're labeled a cancer patient, everything is that to your detriment. And one thing I would encourage loved ones and anybody afflicted with cancer is to realize that you can die from untreated infections, a freaking hangnail, if it's not treated. So you do not allow yourself to be pigeonholed as only a cancer patient because you know what? They can't do anything for you. If you're labeled a cancer patient,
They
oh
don't,
gee, that's
they
too
give up.
bad.
They give
Yeah.
up.
Oh,
Yeah.
you broke your leg. Oh gee, that's too bad. That's the cancer. You can't do that. And I've seen it in my mother-in-law. I've seen it in two people on the top of my head where they tragically died from an infection because it's the cancer and they did not get appropriate treatment. And that's just kind of a word to the wise. It's kind of like, I can't talk about things you can't believe. You need your puke bag. That's one of them right there. So, and it's not one particular, it's an attitude and it's um, I don't know. I don't know what to say about it. So let's talk about something fun.
I, I think we've done this subject pretty well. Is this thing available on Amazon already?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. Um,
I'll leave the links in there for that.
Great. And it's not in Barnes and Noble in the store though. So
They censor. I mean, I had books that wouldn't, they didn't get into the stores in Barnes and Noble. In fact, Kennedy's book about
Fauci.
Fauci I went to Barnes and Noble multiple times and I couldn't get it. The stupid bastards. I mean, they're
Okay.
part of the globalist thing.
Well, that kind of makes me feel better in a worse way because, I was thinking, I could see if it was for Barnes and Noble, if it was the Trump 20th book of the season saying that Trump's a Nazi,
Yeah.
I could see, not wanting to carry that. But when there's just one book in the space that's totally unique, that is going to have a uh, dramatic impact. I don't know how you don't carry that in the store. I
How
really
many
don't.
reviews do you have on Amazon so far? And how many weeks has it been since the book came out?
It's just been 1 week.
One
So
week.
it came out last Tuesday.
You see, what you have to do is mail your entire list and tell them to review it as soon as possible, because the number of reviews that you get spiffs from Amazon if they're playing the game honestly, and they will bump up your visibility. Do you have someone who promotes you on Amazon ads?
Well, the Skyhorse has a PR
Yeah.
and marketing
Okay.
department. So
So
that,
you,
that's why I bothered with this. I've done self-published books before and,
yeah,
they kind of limp along. They're
that's right.
redheaded stepchildren, so it's kind of, I wanted to do, if I was going to do it, I wanted to do it right. And
Yeah.
if Skyhorse didn't take it, I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
So, I have faith in them, but I was surprised that Barnes and Noble didn't carry it, but not surprised. And so, like I said before, Big Cancer got that paper retracted. So they're not, they can either fight this, which they can do very easily, or they can see the logic and the jig is up. The time for all this bullshit's over. And, get in the game. There's a lot more money in saving people. The people who get cancer is a small percentage of the population. The people who don't want to get cancer is everybody. So if you appreciate that and you realize the advantage of what's known as first mover advantage, you can get out ahead of your competition and get behind the prevention of cancer using anti-parasitic program, which is really the goal in what I'm doing here. Yeah, Fen-Ben cures cancer in people who get it. Wouldn't it be nice if we can just forget the whole thing? Just figure out first of all, figure out what cancers Fen-Ben does not work in and why. That will tell you, because you have a cure for these solid tumor cancers, you have a tool to understand why Fen-Ben doesn't work with these other cancers. And that should be, to somebody with a scientific and oncological mind who knows what they're doing, they should see that right away. That's because of this. So I know how this stuff works. I admit I'm not the expert. I am disappointed and also honored at the same time that I've been put in this position. I don't have a career to lose. I'm retired. I I have stuff to lose, but it's something that is, I don't know. Maybe I was the right person at the right time.
So does Fenbin have any efficacy against Lyme disease?
I don't know. I think you have to say, what's the mechanism of Lyme disease, and I don't know enough.
It's a spirochete.
Yeah. Um, Certainly ivermectin would, some anti-parasitic. I mean, that's a bioweapon, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So if you kill the,
That's a sick story. It's
yeah,
incredible. Yeah,
right. But, going back to bioweapons, so my mother-in-law had turbo cancer. Have you heard that phrase
of
before?
course.
So she in 2000, and so this whole thing started in 2021. She had metastatic breast cancer in 2021. The little known fact that's kind of weird is she had a bilateral double mastectomy in 2009. So how does she get metastatic breast cancer everywhere in 2021? Well, what happened, the most likely mechanism is that when the breasts were removed, uh, they cut through the tumor, released it into the blood supply. The cancer cells were held dormant by the immune system in check, spread throughout the body. Something needed to come in and remove that inhibition. That was two Moderna mRNA COVID shots in the spring and summer of 2021. By the end of 2021, she had metastatic breast cancer everywhere where it was bad enough that she was given last rites. So fenbendazole cures turbo cancer. So I'm positive she had it. There's no official diagnosis of that, but given what happened, that is most likely that she had turbo cancer, um, caused by the Moderna mRNA shots, two of them. one or two. She thinks she had one. I'm pretty sure she had two, where she got sick both times. That shows it's working. Remember that
Yeah,
BS?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so the the COVID shot not only gave her COVID, it also released her dormant cancer cells from inhibition. But fortunately, Fenben fixed it. So now that there's a epidemic of cancers in young people that usually only old people get, like colorectal cancer, and the powers that be are trying to blame it on lifestyle, diet, inactivity. Basically, it's the victim's fault. Um, no, clearly it's related to COVID. So what I like to say is, the experts don't know what's causing the epidemic of cancers among young people, but they're sure it's not the COVID shots. It's like, come on, give me a break. So to the extent that the COVID shots are causing these epidemics of cancers in young people that typically only occur in old people, obviously it's the immune system exhaustion cause as a mechanism. But fortunately, there's FenMed, so you don't have to be afraid. I mean, it may not work for everybody, and that's the thing. If there weren't idiosyncratic differences among different populations, different people, I would be surprised. But if we look at the parasite literature, it's pretty universal, and parasites have been around a lot longer than us. And the fenben is a pretty potent anti-parasitic. Um, so that's basically it. The whole cancer is a parasite theory, which is the name of the book, is really becoming very useful. So the whole idea of a theory is to construct how you think about things. And a lot of people will say, well, you have the somatic mutation theory, you have the Warburg hypothesis, and some other ones. Those all speak to the nature, to the what causes cancer. My theory is, what is cancer? What is it? What is the nature of cancer? And what I'm saying is cancer is a parasite. Um, at a minimum, it behaves very similarly to a parasite. First and foremost, because an anti-parasitic kills both of them, right? I mean, that's kind of like high school logic. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
but when you actually look at it, it's, I think it's harder to disprove that cancer is not a parasite than to prove that it is, because there's really nothing that separates them when you really do a deep dive into it. Now, it was too detailed, too eggheady for the book to go into these things. But if you're interested, I could kind of give you a couple points
I'd love to
that
hear it.
will blow your mind. So, um, in addition to being subject to um, the same drugs, antiparasitics, and conversely, cancer drugs kill parasites. You kind of have to have the bidirectionality for the model to work. But why would you ever give a side effect laden chemotherapy drug to kill a parasite when you have fenben to do it without side effects? So that'll never be done. But just so you know, uh, chemotherapy drugs kill parasites as well. They have to by definition. Uh, they don't do as well a job, but anyway. So
So
anyway,
you think there's a possibility that everyone who has cancer has parasites, and that killing these parasites are this treatment, or that it doesn't? That's anyway.
it's two sides of the same coin. So the India data, the Mass Drug Administration data, the differences between the nations that use antiparasitics and don't, suggest that fenben and drugs like it prevent cancer. They also may kill incipient cancer before it becomes detectable. On the other side of the coin, on the other side of the antiparasitic coin, chronic low level uh, inflammation caused by untreated parasitic infections can also be a risk factor for many cancers. And the list is extensive. So, which was a surprise to me that I didn't know that when I wrote the book. So, a parasitic infection is a risk factor for cancer. So, obviously, if you use an anti-parasitic, you eliminate that risk factor and you're less likely to get cancer. What I'm talking about now is the biological and biochemical similarities between cancer and parasites that is not necessarily common knowledge. So uh, one had some people would say that the main difference with a parasite is it comes from outside the body and infects the body, whereas cancer is a bad cell gone rogue. So self versus non-self. That's a dimension that cancer and parasites differ on. Well, yes and no. So, um, what may be happening with cancer is that early on, it's a cell that becomes rogue, a self cell. The genetics are of the victim, the host, but over time, the cancer cell morphs, evolves into a standalone obligate parasite, which it appears that that's what it does. It becomes not of the cell. And the evidence for that is that cancer tumors, cancer cells, as they become tumors, like you said, are heterogeneous, but they also march to the tune of a different drummer. So cancer cells, at some point in the lifespan of the cancer cell, develop biological rhythms, circadian clocks that are not entrained to the host. They become separate. They're asynchronized. They are completely genetically, the clock genes are totally different than the victim or the host's genes, just like in parasites. So cancer appears to be starting as self, and then it transitions into non-self. The Again, we're way out in the weeds on this.
It's all right.
Yeah. So we're way out in the weeds on this. So the theory can dictates your thought. It's kind of like a religion almost, a theory. So the next thing, so the biological clock difference that evolves. I don't know when they switch, but the cancer and parasites both have biological clocks that do not run, that are not entrained to the host, arguing that both are not of the self, even though cancer may start of the self and then it transitions. Again, subject to experimental uh, proof or disproof. That's one theory that seems to be emerging from this cancer as a parasite theory. The next is the next thing that parasites and cancer cells are very similar on is they're the only two. You know how when you do a karyotype of chromosomes, they kind of look, we have 23 and they're all matched up
Yes.
like Noah's Ark going into the Ark. So
Right.
you have all your 23 chromosomes matched up. That's called a karyotype. So if you look at a karyotype of a parasite, it doesn't look like that. It kind of looks like a mess. So some will be matched up, some will be just have one, some will have like half of a chromosome, some will have three, four. And then there's like a bunch of junk, bunch of busted and pieces of them on the bottom, like a junk drawer of chromosomes.
Right.
Cancer cells show the same disordered karyotype. It's called aneuploidy. Those are the only two cells that show that. Again, what's the function? Well, it allows, if you think about it, it's it's not a bug, no pun intended. It's a feature. So parasites and cancer cells are they evolve on steroids. They have to evolve within the lifespan of the organism. They're not going to be, theoretically, they're not going to be transmitted to another organism to survive. So they have to have this junk drawer of additional genes to rapidly adapt to
Evolve.
any environmental change. So it's kind of like evolution on steroids within the cancer cell and the parasite cell. Now, I'm not a geneticist, but a geneticist would, I know, I know what I don't know, and I know what they know, that they would look at that and they would say, holy shit, you know, that's what we should be looking at is the aneuploidy similarities. If we and we can understand it in parasites a lot quicker than cancer cells. So once we understand that in parasites, we can apply that knowledge to cancer cells. So the beauty of the cancer as a parasite theory is you don't have to study cancer to cure cancer or to refine what we're doing. You can study parasites in a dish. There's no ethical problems at all. You can study them and you can dump anything you can screen drugs quickly on parasites and see what they do. And because our knowledge of parasites is a lot more complete than it is of cancer behavior, we can apply that information. So I like to say that, I'm kind of like a matchmaker between the bug ladies and the parasitologists and the cancer doctors. So
Yeah.
get them together, kind of like grand rounds, how, somebody will come in and talk about butterfly mating behavior. And you say, I don't want to hear that. Maybe I'll go for the wine and cheese. But then they're using a tool that you can apply to your science. And you say, wow, if I didn't come to this, I never would have known that. So it's kind of like the value of interdisciplinary uh, crosstalk. So parasitology and oncology are going to be the two disciplines that when they come together, they're going to figure all this out because it's all there. But
Bill,
finally,
go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, but finally, the whole, I don't think I want to get into the next thing.
Okay.
That's a little too far out there. And I think now what we want to, the theory gives you tremendous predictive power because it allows your mind to actually entertain the idea that something can happen. So if you at least entertain the idea that cancer could be a parasite, I'm challenging people, disprove it.
There's a
Disprove
strain
it.
of academic idealism in your thought process that I'm sure it seems to shelter you from some of the anger I experience. My idealism is long gone, and
Yeah.
I think when you think about the barf bag, I think about the organization that opposes us, and I mean, it's so pathological, it's beyond belief. But Bill, it's been an honor to talk to you. This has been one of my best interviews of the year, or certainly the last 2 years, and I will promote it every way I can. And I've got some other things to. And again, it's benfin.substack.com, right?
No, it's fenbendazole.substack.com.
Got it.
And that's the
Benbendazole.substack.
Substack. And that kind of, the book has a lot of that stuff, but the book has new information in it that I think people, when they read the whole thing start to finish, they come away saying, son of a bitch, there is a cure for cancer.
If
And
you That's what I'm coming away from this from with. Yeah, so I'm grateful for your time, and I will I would like to pause this and chat just for a moment.
sure.